Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Yarak webinar. Thank you so very much for joining us today. My name is Maiko Miyazaki from Yaraku, and it's my honor to introduce today's special panel discussion featuring Mr. Jochen Hummel, CEO of S-Team in Korean and the founder of Trados, and Mr. Yvan Hennecart, former vice president of SDL International, and Professor Masaru Yamada from Rikyo University, who is a chief evangelist at Yaraku. The discussion will focus on the essential translation skills required in the age of generative AI. So we hope you enjoy the session until then. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Professor Yamada.
Okay. All right. So welcome to Yarak seminar. We have wonderful guests today, and we will talk about technology now and then. I will be the moderator. My name is Masaru Yamada from Rikyo University. Okay, so first guest is Johan. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm Jochen Hummel. I'm CEO of S-Team and Corion, two companies based out of Germany, which are building language factories and merging terminology management with knowledge management. Most people still know me as founder of Trados. So many years ago in Stuttgart, Germany, I founded Trados and played my role in establishing translation memory as the workhorse of the translation industry.
Thank you. And another guest is Yvan.
Yes. So good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Yvan Hennecart. I have been in the translation and localization industry for about 30 years in multiple roles. I was a VP of operations for SDL for quite a long time, and was in charge of the Americas. So, we had a lot of fun at the time of BlackBerry and all those people. And more recently, I have filled CXO roles, so consulting roles with multiple companies in the localization industry, but also at large in the digital content industry.
Okay, so we are so happy to have you for this discussion. Okay, so I have prepared topics, very exciting, not really exciting topic, but I have prepared three things I'd like to talk about. So first, I will briefly explain what I want to talk with you. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, this is a title, The Origin and Evolution of Translation Technology. And three topics. Then the first topic is, since we have Johan here with us today, I'd like to start by discussing Trados. So the first, we want to hear about the origin of Trados. Johan, we want to hear about how this tool came to be and perhaps some personal experiences or reasons that inspire its creation. Because when we think about this, there was a societal context back in 1990s. Rather than maybe your personal reasons, I'm interested in understanding why there was such a need for tool like Trados at that time, back in 1990s, And this was a period when IT companies were rapidly globalizing. For example, Microsoft was releasing global versions of Windows, and numerous IT companies were following suit with their own global expansion. Trados was in many ways a product of its time, receiving initial funding from Microsoft and fulfilling growth demand in the industry. And lastly, why did Trados become the industry standard? Of course, after its acquisition by companies like SDL, it became the de facto standard tool in the industry. But Johan, we'd like to hear your own perspective on why it gained such prominence and became a cornerstone tool in the translation. So those are the things that,
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's a good question. And I
It's a
think
good question.
there are many reasons for this.
Yeah.
And Trados users will agree, and users of other tools might disagree, but in the end, you cannot argue with success. And I would say that very early in the development, we paid a lot of attention to make Trados very user-friendly. So the first version was just sitting on top of Microsoft Word and made it very easy for people to just start the translation process and get going without having to exporting files, putting them somewhere, and then being in single font dialog boxes, which was the standard of these days. But to work in a truly WYSIWYG environment, and Trados would seamlessly collect your translations in the background and propose new ones whenever you have to translate a new sentence. The same is true for Multiterm, the other component, not to forget. There are two main databases Trados worked with, and the following tools, which is the translation memory, but also the terminology management. Also, that component still is the standard today. Hasn't changed much in design. If you think about a software application which is almost 30 years old and still it's setting the standards, you can, of course, feel a bit looking back how innovative the design was at that time and how user-friendly and how appealing it was. But we also built certain systems around Trados, and one system or one tool was the repetition analysis or the text analysis, which would tell you how much you will gain using a translation memory tool. And originally I designed this as a marketing tool because we were a startup, small company. So I was at trade shows presenting Trados and trying to convince customers that this is a good thing. And many people, many translators came back and said, look, my texts are not so repetitive. So it's an empty database. So what do I really gain? And I said, well, I bet you your texts are repetitive. No, it's always new, blah, blah, blah. So I thought, okay, I need to write a little program or a little tool to prove and show to customers how repetitive their texts actually are. Because in the end, I also wanted to sell Trados and get some money for it. And for the ROI calculation, of course, it's key that your texts are repetitive. And my statement was always, it pays off in the first project. And with this tool, I actually showed them that it did. But this tool actually changed the way translations are contracted. Till today, we have this famous fuzzy match matrix with no matches, 100% matches, fuzzy matches. Until today, this is the way translations are outsourced by most people. And it has set the standard, which hasn't changed till today. So that tool, of course, was an incredible money saver for the large corporations. You mentioned Microsoft. They didn't fund our initial development. We were already fairly established when they bought a share in Trados. Not so much to fund development, but to have rather a foot in the door. So at that time, Trados was already well established. But for them, of course, it was an incredible money saver, which I guess till today saved them, and I'm not exaggerating, probably more than $1 billion.
Yeah, true. Did you get any negative feedback from professional translators because of that? Money saver for
yes,
the clients, but
many of the discussions we have today, or let's say since NMT hit the market and now with generative AI, remind me, of course, of the early days of translation memory. It's a productivity tool, an incredible productivity tool. But whenever you have innovations, and that's more true than ever today, if you are a laggard, if you come late, and if you're skeptical, then in the end, you will just have to use these these tools, and you will be paid cost plus. And that was also true with translation memory. But if you were an early adopter, I know people, was once invited, and a translator said to me, Jochen, look at this house. Trados paid this for me. So people who were early adopters and who were ahead of the curve made a lot of money with Trados. The people who have been told, well, you have to use Trados, of course, at that point, the benefits were already taken off the table. So it's always the same with innovations. You can either fight them and they will happen anyhow, and then you are, let's say, at the end where you won't benefit from it, or you are a front runner and you will get the benefits and harvest the innovation. And that's so true also today, because we have the same discussions we had with translation memories about translation memory in the 90s we have today about Gen AI.
I'd agree with that.
Right.
Totally.
Anything else, Yvan, you want to add?
No, I mean, one thing, the whole thing that Jochen and I have talked about this many, many times, but the one thing that, as I hear him speak today, is there's only one sentence that comes to mind, and it's history keeps on repeating itself, right? And so, I mean, I think we've had, or at least in my time, I have seen three major transitions. It's been the MT transition. The transition memory transition. So the introduction of tools such as Trados and other translation memory tools. Then a little bit later on, we started playing with machine translation. That was also a very big change for the industry. And now we're looking at what we are, or for the past 24 months, since it was ChatGPT came in November, we've seen AI. But actually, AI is not new to our industry. I mean, we were doing AI 8 years ago. We were doing machine translation and neural machine translation. And I think I've attended multiple conferences this year. And one of my feedback to Jochen is this hasn't changed. We're still discussing the same thing over and over. That you've got, on the one hand, the translators who are afraid they're going to lose their jobs. Of course, they're not going to lose their jobs. I mean, they would have lost their jobs, or their jobs would have been made obsolete. At the time of translation memory, at the time of machine translation. I think that one of the main thing here is that our industry as almost a tradition, I would say, has a hard time adapting to new technologies, has a hard time adapting to new concepts, and such, it is very, very seldom ahead of the curve. If you look, what's funny, and so one thing Jochen hasn't discussed yet, I'm sure you will discuss in a minute, but when we look at CAT tools, we're mostly looking at the same CAT tools that were launched 25, 30 years ago. And so, why has our industry not been more of a proponent of progress to align with the rest of the digital content industry? That would be the question.
Let's get into the topic later, I guess.
Yeah. This is not going to be very popular, but let's have it.
Okay. So want to move on to the next topic then. Because eventually we will discuss the issue you just raised. I'm more or less like a translator inside, and I'm always interested in this topic, like shift in translation and revision. So please bear with me for this one. The second topic that I want to discuss is something that I've been particularly interested in recently. In fact, I earned my PhD in translation studies, and my dissertation topic was actually revising text. And the focus was on interaction between a human translator and tools, especially in translation memory and machine translation plus post-editing. It's a field I've studied extensively, and it's also the reason I'm currently assisting with work at the Yarakzen. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on and insights on this topic, especially given how much translation practices have evolved since the introduction of CAT tools like Trados. Technologically speaking, we've seen a shift from CAT tool to machine translation, and naturally, it has changed the role of human translators. We've moved from translating everything from scratch to primary post-editing machine translation output, or the Gen AI output nowadays, And this shift brought about significant changes in the role of human translator. The role of reviser, for example, has become highly important. But I believe even that role is evolving. Why?
Yes.
Yeah, because the advent of generative AI, with this technology, we can pre-edit or the prompt engineer translations to achieve better initial output, minimizing the amount of post-editing required. In many cases, reviser's role has shifted to that of a quality of evaluator or like a quality assurance specialist, rather than someone who is heavily involved in revising the entire text. So I want to hear your thoughts, your perspective on how this is playing out in practices, as well as your thoughts how these human roles may continue to change in the future.
Well, we have to be careful that we are not oversimplifying things. So I myself, for years, already saying that we should sunset CAT tools. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't recycle previously translated content. So the best translation is still the translation we can recycle from what we have done before. Simply, not necessarily because it saves a lot of money, it's also a positive effect, but also for consistency. So in many use cases, this is important that something which has not been changed also remains unchanged in its translation. So with all the Gen AI and NMT and so on, we still want to recycle as a first step. But recycling, everybody thinks about translation memory. And the problem with translation memory is has been designed 30 years ago. Most people won't know, but at that time, computers were, let's say, a bit less fast than they are today. So we had to work segment by segment, and we had to take these segments out of context because it was a way of data compression, which was necessary to be able to do some advanced technologies at that time, like fuzzy matches. Today, you can build huge, what we call content repositories, where you store bilingual files and then recycle not segment by segment, which out of context, of course, is not perfect, but recycle larger chunks of content. So that's something you still want to do, independent of machine translation or Gen AI or whatever, simply for consistency reasons. So that will remain. So that already makes your workflow a bit more complex. Everything you cannot recycle, well, there you probably today will use a combination of machine translation and then automatic post-editing, which can be done by Gen AI. But the large language models are trained with, the content of the internet. And so they wouldn't know the specific style, expressions, terminology of your customer. So again, either you tune or train an LLM, which is hard, very hard for most people and also most companies, not possible. Or you mentioned prompt engineering, you prompt smartly the LLM, giving it the information which is now relevant and specific for the customer. But where's this information coming from? So somebody needs to maintain this information in terms of, in case of terminology, somebody needs to keep the right terminology, but the terminology needs to be in context. So a term base or dictionary doesn't do it neither. Dictionaries, terminology databases were primarily used by humans who can search for terms and understand which term to use. If you do the same with machines, like in prompt engineering, you need way more information. So you need to elevate your terminology database to a knowledge graph so that you know in which kind of, that you keep the domains specific and that you know what actually the current piece of content is talking about. So all these things are easily set, prompt engineering, Gen AI, NMT, but to put them into production and make them work hand in hand and also still recycle existing content is a rather complex thing. So that's where we built what we call language factories. It's a fairly complex workflow where different linguistic assets need to play hand in hand, well orchestrated, to achieve the desired result. Back to your question, what is the role of the translator in there? Certainly not to, what I often say, do words. So doing translation is now automated and done by NMT or Gen AI. Post-editing can also be automated to a certain degree. As of today, not completely, but to a certain degree. But in order to make all this work, somebody needs to build these workflows. Somebody needs to curate the linguistic assets which you want to recycle, and somebody has to manage the multilingual knowledge. So these are the new roles, and basically all these roles are targeted to enable the other tools and to enable the workflow to do a good job. So the way the roles will evolve is from becoming a, let's say, translator. You will become a data scientist, somebody who maintains the resources or provides the specific knowledge to the AI so that it is doing a good job.
Yeah. Johan, you have like the engineer background from college, whereas Yvan has like the linguist's background. So I don't know. I'm more like a translator, linguist background person, So also I'm in a position educating professional translator at college and the graduate levels, where I have to teach how to become translator. But now the question is, what are roles of translators? And you said someone has to deal with building those the technologies and the workflow and so forth. In your opinion, do you think that can be done by engineer like people or like the language specialists like people? Do you know any
The problem
opinions?
in our industry is that typically, and they're talking in stereotypes here, people who are in engineering are not so great with language, and people who are in language are not so great in engineering. It's a stereotype, I agree, but there's some truth in it, right? So what we have seen over the years when we hired people, of course, there are people who are studying languages and linguistics, but they are also quite interested in technology. So often they were studying computer linguistics. So there are these people, and they are typically then the ones who build workflows, go into tools, design tools, and so on. The people who are less, let's say, interested in engineering and fascinated by technology, they would be then more maintaining the linguistic assets and curating content and managing multilingual knowledge. Because that's the task which is, let's say, less technical, doesn't require so much technical skills, but it requires domain knowledge and the precision you have to have as a linguist to make sure that the AI has knowledge it can leverage. So I think there are, depending on the skills, interests, and areas people want to focus, there are also then corresponding roles. But one thing I think is pretty clear, that these people will not, or these jobs will go away, where you sit from 9 to 5 and where you're translating documents, even if it's with a CAT tool,
Right.
because that will evolve more, and you mentioned it already, into a role of revision, but also revision will be more and more automated. I think in the foreseeable future, it will be generating knowledge, maintaining knowledge, and enabling AI to process these huge amount of content which needs to be translated. And I personally believe, recently somebody in a conference said, how dare I to say what is fun and what is not? But I personally believe it's a more fulfilling task, definitely a more value generating task, to provide knowledge which then can be multiplied than sitting there and output a certain amount of pages per day.
I totally agree with that. I couldn't agree more. And I think that, there's a role for everyone. And, when I look at the difference between, I was educated as a linguist and a translator about 30 years ago, unfortunately, at this point, probably a little bit longer than that. We barely touched on technology. Now, and I had the chance to share a couple of chats with students from the University of Monterey a couple of weeks ago at Loc World. Now, technology is an integral part of what these guys are learning. And I do think that we can't forget our primary focus. We are as linguists, as actors of the localization industry, we are if you will, the pillars in the vision, in a vision to deliver content and deliver a specific a user or buyer experience. That can only be done with content. And what we've seen is over the past 10 years, but over the past 15 years, an explosion of content. And to be honest, there's not enough translators around the world to translate all the content that's available, nor should probably all the content be translated. You've got different shelf lives. You've got contents that some users prefer getting in their language, other parts of the content in their experience that they like to receive in English, for example, or in another language. And so I think we're at this point we are that much closer to achieving the vision of delivering a customized experience for everyone, wherever they are from, whatever language they speak, whatever their social background is. And so that is, in essence, the role of the linguist, to be an instrument in fine-tuning technology, and that this may not be very popular, but to fine-tuning technology so that we can achieve that vision that we've been talking about for 10, 15 years. And, would you rather, translate 4,000 or 6,000 words per day? Or would you rather be in charge of the overall linguistic or part of the overall linguistic strategy for a global brand? I think it's a lot. I agree with Jochen. It's probably a lot more fun. It's probably better in delivering what we're trying to deliver. And we mustn't forget that we are, getting that much closer to a vision that has been articulated by multiple players in the localization industry, including you, Jochen, for the past 15, 20 years. So that would be, I think that's the future role of the translator.
Yeah. We we have so many contents to be translated, and the human translator cannot afford.
They can't.
Right,
It's impossible. It's impossible.
Right. Okay, so want to move on to the last topic. It kind of relates to what we have discussed so far. And share my screen. So I guess so beyond localization and translation, basically, what's your thoughts on in the future, right? The third topic is, I guess related to the work Jochen and Yvan are currently involved in. Since both of you have a wealth of expertise in this area, I'd like to get your insights. This topic goes beyond localization and translation. It's about concept of language operations, you might want to call, or lang ops, which have been gaining traction for quite some time. I guess for those, the audience, I'd like to briefly explain what the lang ops are, because it's not a well-known concept in Japan. So as far as I understand what the lang ops are, like it's kind of, first it's a strategic framework. The lang ops serves as a strategic framework for ensuring consistent multilingual operations within a company. It enables a unified management of all multilingual activities, including translation and localization. And two, technology integration is another thing. I think the lang ops requires the integration of multiple tools such as translation management systems, machine translations, terminology management systems, and so forth. So companies can combine these tools as needed to achieve both efficacy and quality. And the third is a data utilization. By implementing lang ops, companies can collect and analyze multilingual customer feedback and market data, which can inform business strategies and product development. So last topic, what's your opinions, your thoughts on this topic and the future of lang ops and beyond maybe? So any opinions from Jochen maybe to begin with?
I mean, you explained it quite well, actually. Thank you. And the idea behind lang ops is an observation. So if you look at the taglines of the leading LSPs in the world, then they are saying basically, we ensure that you, big company, are understood by all clients all over the world. You are understood, passive. So the model behind this is there's a content owner, a large company. They broadcast content globally, and obviously if you broadcast in Japan, you have to do this in Japanese. If you do it in Germany, in German. But the thing is, that model is last century communication, I would say, because latest since Web 2.0, which is, let's say, 20 years ago, not quite last century, but customers are talking back. And they are incentivized and invited and motivated to talk back. And so many people might have a good passive understanding of a language, but when they have to talk back, when they have to describe their problems, their wishes, their comments, their feedback, most of them will do this in their own language. So it's not so much about being understood, but about understand, so that you understand your consumers, your customers. And that's a difficult task, a different task. And obviously, if you, for example, want to know what people talk about your company on social media, you cannot translate Twitter or Facebook. That's impossible. So the only way to be able to understand your customers is by using multilingual AI in multilingual chatbots, in language agnostic language search, in text analytics, and so on, and so on, and so on. So this goes, of course, way beyond translation and is a way bigger problem to solve, because what you have to do is you have to support any customer-facing function in a company, and there are many. So the idea of lang ops is to not talk about translation, localization, but more about managing multilingual data to enable your company not to broadcast content, but to communicate in any language. And we are far away from that. Even the biggest companies in the world are just making the first step towards this. If you want to talk to them, in most cases, you have to use their corporate language, which mostly is English. So that's the revolutionary idea of LangOps. It's to understand your customers no matter what language they speak. For this, of course, you have to use AI, but this AI needs a lot of good data to function properly. And guess where this data is created? Where a lot of these resources are already sitting in one form or the other today. It's created in the translation process and also in the content creation process, but primarily in the translation process. And you talked about new roles for translators. We are sitting on the linguistic assets, which will enable companies to communicate with their customers in any language. And let's face it, translation wasn't really at the center of a company. It used to be at the fringes of companies and was considered to be a cost factor, which you had to undertake in order to be able to broadcast your content. But now this data is moving at the core of any textual AI initiative of larger companies. So suddenly we are at the core of companies being able to exploit their linguistic assets so that they can communicate with their customers. And LangOps is, as you rightly put it, a strategic framework. It's carried by its pioneers, so nobody owns LangOps. It's a bit like DevOps. So it's a movement, it's a strategy. And it shows for our listeners and for linguists a path forward into what they probably will do in the future, because beyond enabling AI systems to translate, we will also enable AI systems to communicate, to talk to humans in any language.
Anything you want to add, Yvan?
No, I mean, other than it is the evolution. LangOps is the evolution of localization. And I think that, yes, there is the data. There are workflows that are getting more and more complex, and that really need to be handled in the background, to some extent, without the linguist or without the language specialist knowing what is going on in the background, as long as they can provide their feedback or their opinion. I think that as we've said all along, we're migrating to a workflow we're migrating to a process that requires a lot of technology. Needs to be simplified so that when time comes for the human in the loop to intervene, they can do that quickly. And this is, also part of the reason why I've been involved with Yaraku and the great team there in helping them develop and helping them market a tool that does not require a degree in data in development to operate. And so I think that what will be important to carry on this effort, to carry on this process, is for LangOps to have, and I'm not sure this exists already, but for LangOps to develop a platform that allows everybody to intervene when they need to intervene, whether you are a developer, whether you're a scientist, whether you're a linguist, and that's not one tool. I think it's a technology stack that assembles multiple tools.
I was kind of, concerned with the size of the company who have money to do this. On one hand, I don't know. On the other hand, like small scale companies want to do multilingual communications, but they don't know how. They don't have a finance, and how can we solve this? I think the divide between the size of the companies are also, some people are very conscious of those things, but some are not. The divide increases as if there's no one platform or some kind of one technology that can allow everyone do the communication, then I think the money makes the divide greater. And
Not necessarily.
Maybe not necessary. Okay.
Not necessarily. I think smartness makes the divide. Because, look, I mean, the kind of tools which is available today for everybody, is incredible. If I look at the early days of Trados, I mean, basically we had to develop everything, including the text editor, ground up. And today, a few lines of Python code give you the power of LLMs, of AI, of machine translation, and so on and so on and so on. So it's not so much the money, it's more like being smart and putting the right things together. All the information is there, all the tools are there. Most products are available in software as a service. You don't need to install, you don't need to have to suffer big upfront costs. So I think it's more being smart and seeing the right things, jumping on the right movements. The technology as such is accessible and it doesn't have big initial costs, and the costs will scale with your business. So that's not a big risk. So I don't think so.
So your role, your role in society right now is to enlighten those people to be smart enough to realize the reality.
Indeed. I mean, of course, LangOps, I'm using this as a term also to market my products, but it's a long shot, and I could also do this more directly. So I think in a way, what Yvan, other LangOps pioneers, and I are doing is we're delivering on a silver plate to the industry a strategy, how things will evolve, what companies should do to become truly multilingual, but also what the people who are working in this industry can do to develop their departments or also their personal careers. Indeed, I think I consider this to a certain part a service to the community, to the ecosystem.
Yvan?
Yes, I agree. I totally agree. Again, the technology already exists. I mean, I think that the difference between building technology 20, 30 years ago and building it now is that, we've had, close to, 15, 20 years of open source technology. We've had a lot of flexibility. And so, when I see certain tool makers, and I'm not going to name names, but when I see sort of tool makers who are trying to fit this entire LangOps concept into their existing platform, it's just not going to work. It's not flexible enough. It's not innovative enough. When I said earlier, we still need to build the platform for LangOps, it may not be the same platform for everyone. But, I think we also have the opportunity, and this is what we're trying to guide, we also have the opportunity to take a look at what the requirements are, and based on what exists, put the best stack together for each of the industries. And so to your question as, well, yeah, but is there going to be a great divide between, those who have a lot of budgets and those who don't have budgets? The ability for a company to be multilingual and to be able to, to broadcast the message in whatever language they want, they shouldn't be a question of, how much can you invest in technology? Technology is there, and let's use it.
Thank you. I think we have a couple more minutes, I guess. Last message from you. You want to emphasize, you want to send to the audience. I don't know. Very ambiguous questions, but anything, last word?
Well, the last message I would like to send is that LangOps is carried by LangOps pioneers, but so far these are primarily professionals, language professionals from Europe and the Americas. And I would love to see also pioneers in Japan or Asia coming on board, because it is about understanding all your customers. And that's not only customers in the Western world, but global customers everywhere. So the more people are joining this movement and pushing it forward, the better it will be recognized globally. And as I said, it's addressing one of the most important questions students and people, language professionals are facing now: what will happen with their careers? And I firmly believe that LangOps gives that answer.
Yeah, I think so too. Yvan, do you?
I think it's very, very important that whatever solution or, wherever LangOps goes, that it not be limited to, I'll call it the Western world, because we're seeing massive markets developing outside of the traditional markets. And to some extent, it's the same for AI. AI is at the moment, AI is very English-centric. The technologies that we're putting together for localization are very Western world-centric. But there's a world out there, and that world has a voice. And that voice, whether for geopolitical reasons or, for just market expansion, those voices want to be heard, and they need to be understood by the global brands.
Yeah, I hope so too. So, well, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very
And
much.
we had a nice, I guess we need more time. I think I did not bring up yet how this AI should help us. But we should have a second session maybe soon. But it was nice meeting you and nice discussions. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mado-san. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Most content owners treat localization in a throw over the ball process. Here is the source file, give me the target file back. That resembles a bit outdated manufacturing methods, where people were just outsourcing the production of certain components without caring much how it was done. The rise of the IoT, the Internet of Things, though, changed matters, because manufacturers very quickly understood that the data about how certain things are processed can be as valuable as the thing itself. It drives innovation and process optimization. Blindly outsourcing breaks the IoT. So therefore, leading manufacturers make sure that they keep full ownership over process data. So in localization, many companies do collect translation memories and some also bilingual files, but that's only half of the story. What they do not know is how the translations were done. So how do you improve your machine translation if you don't know whether a sentence has been produced by using translation memory or machine translation? How do you tune your process for certain target languages if you don't have the data available? And how do you use new technologies? I would say it's even mandatory for deploying new technologies without having collected process data before. All this can be done with language factories. Language factories, as a matter of fact, are the IoT of translation. They centralize all steps and keep all automated steps in one place and collect all the process information. They provide a smart split between certain automatic tasks, which are centralized, and then outsourced tasks, the human in the loop, which typically are done by LSPs. They provide a simple API, 3 API calls to hand over files, to poll the status of the project, and then to fetch the files. And like this, things work hand in hand, but the company, the content owner, keeps also full ownership over the linguistic assets and the process data. And that process data can be visualized and analyzed to improve the process, but it can also be harvested for other applications. So if you look beyond translation, if you deploy a LangOps strategy, then you have the possibility to use this data to support your company's AI initiatives, basically to support any textual business application. Do you want to harvest your data? Do you want to make more out of your data, more out of your linguistic assets? Well, please contact us. We can show you how. We can run a workshop and figure out how you can make better use of your linguistic assets. The language industry holds a unique advantage over the rest of the world because they have lived their ChatGPT moment already 7 years ago with the arrival of NMT. Their bitmakers as well claimed the achievement of human parity, but actually not much has changed since. Still the same process, still the same costs and so on. So why is that so? Well, people were asking the wrong question. Instead of asking when will be machine translation as good as humans, which is a bit of a philosophical question, they should have asked when will be machine translation on par with what you typically get when you outsource translations, because that's not always so great due to the time constraints, budget constraints, but also simply about the information about the text companies are able to push down the supply chain. If you reframe the question in that way, then of course you put your focus on processes and tools. And the same is happening now. Again, people are saying, well, when will be AI as smart as humans? And either they're over-enthusiastic or over-skeptical, but both are missing the point. The point is, how do you successfully integrate this technology, this marvelous technology, in existing processes? And very often that means to rethink things, to rethink processes, to rethink organizations, but even to rethink business models. At this team, we believe that LLMs will have a very, very game-changing effect. And for a long time, we already have advocated the use of AI in the translation process. And we are not making a secret out of it how we do it. So we are making our language factories available in a software as a service model so that others can benefit from our experience of already deploying this concept, the concept of language factories, the concept of LangOps for many years. Also, the data collected by language factories is an important data treasure for any textual AI initiative of your company. So what we invite you is to join us on this journey. Contact us, learn from us, and maybe we can develop together a LangOps approach, develop language operations for your company.